Hi, everyone, and you are very welcome back to the Social Media News Show from Public Sector Marketing Institute in conjunction with Content Cal. I can't believe it's been a month since we've had our inaugural Social Media News Show. Where is that month gone? And I haven't actually left this square box in a whole month. So, as always, I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Lambert from Content Cal. Andy, how are you getting on?
I'm very well, thank you, Joanne. How are you?
Have you left anywhere in the past month?
No, definitely not. And judging by the lockdown haircut, that is, I've had to resort to cutting my own hair. So I'm looking forward to getting out very soon and looking at a very glorious day today, but which makes a nice change.
So, as always, there's been lots happening on the social media news scene. And because we have you on the show, you have very kindly keeping us up to date with what's happening on the social network. So, where are we going to start today?
Well, let's go through a few slides, actually. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to call out some of the kind of key trends we've seen over the last month. And there's kind of four key themes that all the platforms are working towards. So let's look at trends, which is going to impact our strategies. And then we'll look at where the platforms are going in terms of new updates and features so that we can potentially think about how our content plans and strategies need to evolve. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully in a moment you should see that. Can you see that, Joanne? Just let me know when you can.
Thank you so much. Over to you.
Wonderful. All right. So slightly different format to this than we did last week. So what we're going to do is do a lot shorter presentation where I'm not going to go into every single feature update because there are 72 slides in this deck. So I'm going to kind of spare you some of that and just kind of distill some of the key things that you need to know. So let's start with some thoughts to get us started, really. And I found this screenshot this week and I really liked it. And I think it makes the role of social media incredibly visual as to how it fits in our broader strategy. So I wanted to start by showing this, not a trend as such, but it was something that I found really useful. So I wanted to share it. So on the left-hand side of this graph here, we've got potential traffic. So what could we potentially get from this particular source or marketing channel? So we've got less to more. And then we've got relative time to yield that traffic. So what takes longer to basically generate results from shorter term to long term. And this is how we can start to overlay our strategies to make sure that we've got a sustainable and consistent model of growth. Because I sometimes see this operating at two ends of the spectrum. People decide that they're going to go after content marketing and understand the opportunity. So they go hell for leather and start creating content and then wonder, oh, after a couple of weeks or a month, why don't I have any growth? Why is it not grown as I expected? And so this is one part of this that helps you understand that actually, content marketing is, incredibly important. It has the biggest growth potential, as we can see by this kind of like turquoisey line here, or segment here rather. There's the biggest growth potential, but it does take the longest to yield that traffic. And then the kind of other side of it, I sometimes see businesses weighting too heavily over on the left-hand side, which is about paid advertising, where it's very easy to prove results. Let's face it, putting a bit of money into paid, and there's definitely a reason for doing that, but putting some money into paid, seeing some results and thinking, oh, great, well, I'll just put in more and more money every month. But the effectiveness of paid advertising diminishes over time, as you can see by that kind of yellow dotted line. And it's really important to see how we overlay our strategies. Yes, paid is really good to give us a kickstart to get going, to build that reach. Then we've got the middle segment of where social media and PR is really good because it doesn't take as long to grow, but it also gives us, more consistent growth above paid. Because essentially with paid, the key point to note is that there's only so many people in a market at any given time looking for a certain product or solution. So social media is great to kind of raise awareness, generate demand at scale. And then you've got your kind of longer form content and SEO, which does take a lot of time, but ultimately gives you sustainable growth moving forward. So it's a really nice model. And I just wanted to kind of call that out. But anyway, let's go into some of the kind of key data points. Social media platform growth. So this is the kind of top 8 platforms that typically are the ones that most people use in the Western world. So you can see that all of their growth, I mean, the growth over the last 2 years, unsurprisingly, has been substantial, right? Social media platforms over the last year alone grew at 13%. What that means in numerical terms is 500 million new people were added to social media channels or set up an account on social media in the last 12 months. 500 million. It's insane. So social media is used by 4.2 billion people across the world. So that is about 56% of the world's population. Big, big, big numbers. But ultimately, that growth naturally goes into some of these platforms and gets distributed. So Facebook continues to have the majority of the monthly active users. So monthly active users are people that log in once a month. It's the most important metric for determining growth, because everyone could talk about massive user numbers. If people don't use it, it's not really relevant to us as businesses. But Facebook is big, Instagram is big as well. They're all huge, but I want to call out the three things in the middle, all of which have had over 30% growth over the last 2 years. TikTok, for reasons that we all know, might touch on that a little bit later on. Pinterest, which is a really important platform, only used for certain purposes though, not relevant for every business, but has a very focused audience and drives good growth. But there is something on Pinterest that I think has relevance for every business. So I'm going to touch on that in a bit. And Reddit. So this icon here is Reddit, which isn't actually as familiar to many people as it would be in the States. So I'm going to do a bit of a quick spotlight on Reddit as an example. So often Reddit doesn't get considered as a social media platform, but ultimately it is. And if we were doing this presentation in the US, our US colleagues would know much more about Reddit and be much more familiar with it than us in the UK, for example. And where I think Reddit fits into a strategy really nicely isn't just necessarily into another platform to distribute content. Reddit works in a different way to typical social media platforms. Reddit's more like akin to a forum, really, where there's threads of discussion. So it's far less about like, here's a place to send our content to. But Reddit's actually could be used better in another way in a strategy, in a research phase. Within Reddit, there's lots of subreddits. Subreddits are little communities around certain topics. And for example, there's a really good subreddit around content marketing with some really good discussion points. So the level of discussion is good. It's thoughtful. So just like the same way that you might use a Facebook group to kind of be involved in your community, see what's happening, that kind of thing. Similar things happen on Reddit. So I find it personally for Content Cal, I find this a really useful place to do market research, to get feedback on certain things, really active community. So I just wanted to do a quick spotlight on that. But anyway, let's look at the trends and the kind of news and updates, because ultimately that's what we're here to do. 4 key trends as to what we've seen over the last month and what we've seen, to be honest, over the last 12 months and what will continue. 4 key trends. The demographic of people that are on social media is changing. We spoke about this last month as well, and this will continue to shift. There's a couple of really key data points here. 70% of people bought something online in the past month of this age demographic. That's huge. What the last 12 months of lockdown has all kind of caused us to do is shift forward 5 years in terms of our digital behaviors, both in terms of how we find products and how we buy products. And talking of finding products, this is a massive statistic here. 66% increase in discovering new products via social in the past 4 years for this age demographic. And that really does start to simplify our targeting methodologies. Rather than targeting a certain demographic on social, then targeting a different demographic on a different platform, it starts to kind of create a really nice convergence of lots of different demographics on social, which dramatically increases our ability to communicate our marketing messages, whatever message we've got, to a broader audience. So really important trend. So now we go from like marketing to older demographics to something that is very burgeoning, which is the future of VR and AR. I'm sure you've heard the kind of acronyms. They get banded about as buzzwords, where lots of people like to throw them into things to make them sound intelligent. But fundamentally, they're 2 very different things. They shouldn't actually be lumped together because they serve 2 different purposes. Virtual reality is something, it's okay to compartmentalize and think that's down the road, right? This doesn't actually necessarily impact our content. There's huge huge potential in virtual reality for lots of reasons, but not from a content marketing perspective immediately. So let's focus on AR, which is augmented reality. Augmented reality is something that we're seeing an increased adoption of because it feels very natural, from very popular like mobile apps like Pokemon Go, for example, which is augmented reality, to the ways that two key social media platforms, Pinterest and Snapchat, are allowing people to try on certain products, garments, and even try on like lipstick and foundation using their applications, using augmented reality. And we all interact with augmented reality every day when we use filters or we use kind of backgrounds on Zoom. It really is starting to become ubiquitous. So we're going to start to see much more of that happening in social, because it actually starts to become understandable and easier, definitely not easy, to embed part of our content strategy. Will this be an accepted norm for the rest of this year? No, but it's definitely something to think about. Social commerce is absolutely huge. The way that people are changing their purchasing habits, like we were talking about with the kind of 55 plus trend, you know, there's some huge numbers here. 55% of people bought products through social media, and that's directly through social. So once again, talking about how the last 12 months has shifted the world of digital and people's understanding, or kind of not understanding, but more appetite to be able to purchase products directly on social, to click through and buy, and basically complete the whole cycle on social, from discovering something to making that purchase. 87% claiming that social media helped them make a decision, and people are shopping more in the pandemic. And, you know, I think we can see this everywhere, and all of the social media platforms are pushing this way. And in fact, if you looked at all of the updates, which we're not going to go line by line for every update, but if you looked at all the kind of key updates that all the social media platforms are doing, they would, you know, map these trends perfectly, because they're all pushing. Like Pinterest have a shopping function, so do TikTok, so do Snapchat, so do Instagram, so do Facebook. They're all pushing on this. Fourth trend, and it seems kind of an obvious one, but it's really worthwhile calling out. Video still growing. So 4 times people prefer watching YouTube videos than non-social video platforms. 68% of watch YouTube to help them make a purchasing decision. I'm going to call that one out actually for a second. That has been a really important tactic for us at Content Cal, for helping people understand our product more before they make a purchasing decision. YouTube has been such an important part of that strategy, and honestly, it's been core to. It's been the best social channel for us, bar none. That's for sure. Not in terms of interaction, not at all. Don't get many comments. Don't really, likes aren't massive, subscribers aren't massive, but the watch time is huge. So the way that we kind of understand and the way that we rank YouTube content should be very different. We should treat it in a different way, because it's about driving engagement, getting people to watch your videos so that they understand, your product, your offering, whatever it might be. YouTube are also doing a lot of the shopping capability as well. And yeah, talking about YouTube, actually, let's do a bit of a spotlight on it. Now, when I showed those 8 social media platforms at the start of this presentation and showed you their growth, one platform was conspicuous by its absence, and that was YouTube. And percentage-wise, it hasn't grown. It wouldn't look like it's grown as quickly, right? Because about a month ago, it had, maybe 2 months ago, had 2 billion monthly active users. Look at it now, it's added 300 million more people in the last 2 months. So even though that's only 15% growth, in numeric terms, is bigger than anything else. So YouTube is so important to be a part of a content strategy. I see it missing from so many content strategies, to be honest. So there's definitely huge value in making sure we add that as part of our strategy. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to skip over some of the kind of specifics around what's new, and I'm going to go to some of the 4 key trends, and then Joanne and I will have a bit of a discussion around some of these points. So here's the abridged version, rather than going through 50 slides of every unique update. And we can go back, if depending on questions, we can go back to any of those. And I'm happy to share the full slide deck if anyone wants. But fundamentally, from all of the changes that have happened over the last 12 months, we really can deduce 4 key trends that have come out of this. First, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about this, audio first social media, of which many people will think automatically Clubhouse when we talk about that. So there's a few things that we want to call out here. So I'm sorry for the slightly wordy slide, but it kind of encapsulates the previous 50. Clubhouse is now past 30 million downloads. It only launched just a year ago, so it's done phenomenally well. That being said, Clubhouse have been very coy with publishing their monthly active user numbers, because like we spoke about earlier, that's the most important metric of growth. Just because someone has the app installed isn't actually that important. So they've grown well, but judging how popular the app is in the App Store, it seems to be diminishing in popularity. It was ranked 34 in the App Store about 3 months ago. Now it's number 302. So you can see a diminishing in popularity of it. It's not mean it's going away. It means that actually that initial kind of hype around it seems to have died out a bit. And one of those issues, though, they're always going to bump into this, is the fact that it wasn't available on Android, and it's still not, and it's still about 2 months away. So along comes Twitter, announcing something called Audio Spaces, which is very similar to Clubhouse. Audio Spaces currently is just in a closed beta environment, just for testers. I've been testing it out a little bit. The two things that I like better than anything on Clubhouse is the ability to automatically subtitle rather. So when you're speaking, like Joanne and I having a chat now, what you would see on Twitter Audio Spaces is the live subtitling happen. That's so important for accessibility, as we all know. Not only that, it also subtitles, it also transcribes, getting my words mixed up here, it also transcribes everything that's being spoken about in that session. And for me, that's another really important factor, because on Clubhouse, you'll do the session, we'll have a chat, it's not recorded. So if you weren't there, if you missed it the first time, it's gone. And it also means when you spent a lot of time creating content, spent an hour, doing a good session on Clubhouse, it's finished, it's gone. And that for me is a massive issue when it comes to content creation, because we need to maximize our efforts when we're in kind of resource limited environments. So for something like Audio Spaces, where we can get an automatic transcription of everything that we discussed in our audio space, brilliant. We can repurpose it as a blog post, put it in different social content. Lots and lots of opportunities. So Audio Spaces should be out for everyone in April. And I think that's going to mean significant things for audio first social. And I'm really hoping this will be a bit of a renaissance for Twitter, because they've struggled a bit. But as we could expect, Facebook and Instagram are already working on a competitor. We've seen a sneak preview of what Facebook One looks like. So expect to see more from that. I'll report on this more next month. So nothing you really need to do with this information right now, other than the fact of, this audio first social media thing is here to stay. Whether it's going to be a product in its own right, Clubhouse, or whether it's just more of a feature, part of a existing product suite, be it Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. One thing that's for sure is that there's a great appetite for this content, and what it does allow for is fantastic personal interaction. The power of the human voice is incredible. It's unbeatable, right? And it provides a really nice experience for your community. So I'm going to use, sorry, I'm talking lots, but hopefully it's making sense. I'm going to use Twitter as a really good example for the journey of social media interaction. So let's imagine that, I follow Joanne on Twitter, which I do, but I would have followed Joanne because I've found some of her content for whatever reason. I've looked at her content and thought, oh, that's good. I'm going to follow her. That's the most casual interaction, because ultimately, if you follow someone, you're going to occasionally see their content and you might like it and share it sometimes. But if I would think, actually, Joanne's content's quite good, I'd like to kind of learn more about Joanne. What Twitter gives you ability to do, like other platforms, you can do stories on Twitter now, which is akin, well, they call it fleets, which is a very clumsy name, but ultimately it's exactly the same thing that you'd see on Instagram, the story format, or on any other platform. So now what I can do is, not only have I just started following Joanne's content and gone, that's quite interesting, I can then get a bit of a personal feel of Joanne as a person. So her stories are going to be more of a kind of backstage, what she's doing, like the home bit, right? The bit that you wouldn't typically see in the kind of nicely finessed feed content. But then what we've got is another option here through Twitter, is that we could start to do an audio space. So Joanne actually then could start to go kind of create that deeper connection with the audience. So we've gone from watching, just looking at the stuff in the feed, which is quite casual, gone to having a more personal connection through stories, and then creating the deeper personal interaction through an audio space. So now, I have the opportunity to ask Joanne questions and kind of hear Joanne talking live. And it's like, that's a thing that's really powerful about audio as a format, because it provides that extra level of connection. And we can now think about the journey of our social content as like a inverted pyramid, where our feed content is the top of the pyramid, or the bottom, whichever one you're thinking about, the bit that's the widest thing. Rather than the pyramid, let's think about it as a funnel. So that top of the funnel, the widest bit, is the feed content going broad. Story content goes a bit narrower. Story content is more about like the personal interaction, but still broad reaching. And then you've gone into like the audio space, or just a space in general, which, as the name suggests, it's much more kind of personal interaction, where it's a bit more of a one-on-one dialogue. And I think that, for me, is where the opportunity to implement audio first social in our strategies really, really sits. Sorry, I feel like I've been very verbose with that, but hopefully it makes sense. So 3 other things to call out: the rise of private communities. So over the last, in 50 slides in this deck, there's been some significant moves on some of the other platforms, Twitter included, actually, in significant changes of direction towards certain things. And what I mean by that is there's been 2 very, very popular breakout products that are not social media that is definitely worthwhile you being aware of. One of those is called Substack, which is a newsletter platform, which doesn't sound very glamorous. Basically, it allows people to subscribe to newsletters from certain creators. So if I take, Joanne as an example again, she might have a newsletter on Substack, which only is available to people that subscribe to that newsletter. And ultimately, this allows me to get kind of more exclusive access to content that Joanne's putting out, kind of like how Joanne has the private group. So I'm really picking on you today, Joanne, using you as an example. I hope that's okay. So Substack has seen a lot of growth there, and Patreon is a platform where people can pay a subscription to get exclusive access to content from certain people. So we've seen Patreon gain a lot of favor with typical like Instagram influencers, for example. When they built up a big community, going to Patreon allows them to kind of like say, well, there's a certain amount of free content I'll put to my Instagram, but ultimately for the more kind of exclusive stuff, I'll put it to Patreon, which people will need to pay for. Those platforms have individually seen really good success. But of course, like obviously Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, some of the biggest platforms in the world, look at what's happening, in the broader world of community and connection, and think, right, how can we make this part of our platform? So Facebook are rolling out the ability to create newsletters and subscribe to them, and certain subscriptions. So they've already rolled out the ability to subscribe to get exclusive content. The newsletter piece is the bit they're still working on. LinkedIn have rolled out newsletters already and have the ability to subscribe to those newsletters. I think that's a really important point and a differentiation of, it's a small differentiation, but it's a really important one. So let's take LinkedIn as an example. Why would you, encourage people to sign up for a newsletter as opposed to getting someone to follow you? If someone follows you or connects with you on LinkedIn or any other platform, I'm going to use LinkedIn as an example, what they're doing is opting in to see your content, but ultimately they'll only see a small proportion of your content because, naturally the algorithm will only serve the content to, X many people. So really what people are subscribing to is quite kind of casual interaction. Occasionally I'll see your content, occasionally I won't, but whatever. But what a newsletter is, and people subscribing to a newsletter, is a signal of intent to say, your content's really good. I want to make sure I never miss it. So, every week I want to get your kind of newsletter. And for me, that's a really important delineation and an important evolution of how we use social from broad mass messaging into kind of more private focused messaging. Now, jury's still out as to whether you would actually want to build like a big newsletter subscriber base on LinkedIn as opposed to building it on your own database. I think the jury, in my own opinion, is a bit mixed on this one. But the opportunity there is really, really good. So, and plus it's a brand new thing. There's nothing wrong with having your typical newsletter, but having a newsletter on LinkedIn where you replicate the same content. You might have slightly different subscribers on on through your LinkedIn subscriber base. So maybe there's an opportunity to mix of both, but I like that as an opportunity. Twitter have announced the same thing, and it's available now. So if you use Twitter right now, there's an ability to create a newsletter. If you just simply Google Twitter newsletter, you'll find out how to set it up. And talking about the kind of future as private, Twitter have announced this month the opportunity to do super follows. Basically, people pay to subscribe to get exclusive content. Exactly what I was describing with this Patreon situation. So as you can see, like the trajectory of communication and community is becoming more private, it's becoming more focused, it's less about kind of broad interaction, more about kind of personal interaction. So that's a really interesting trend. You're seeing that in the broader market, and you're starting to see the social platforms replicate that. This one I absolutely adore: values-based communication. 71% of consumers in the last 12 months have bought from brands that have aligned to their values. We're seeing a real I hasten to call it a trend because it makes it sound like you would do this for, non-genuine reasons. But fundamentally, this is the trajectory where people are going, where there is now a kind of broader cognizance of a business's corporate and social responsibility, their moral compass, and businesses being really clear about what they stand for on social has been super powerful. And honestly, that's for businesses that are willing to demonstrate their values, their missions, what they believe in, then there's fantastic opportunity for them. I mean, I've linked to this report in here, which goes into a lot more detail on it. But fundamentally, the kind of key takeaway is here is like in whatever content you're doing, social or whatever, being so clear with what you stand for is such an important thing. Obvious statement, but I think many businesses stay away from it for fear of alienating people. And honestly, sometimes opinions can be polarizing, and some businesses that do this really well, I'm talking about large business here, but like an example would be Patagonia in the US, the clothing brand. They stand for sustainability, and they put that out on social continually, right? They care about the circular economy, sustainability, and creating a fairer future for the fashion industry. A lot of the people, people that would purchase from boohoo.com could not care less about that. So Patagonia are alienating an audience based on that message. But what they're doing is building much closer allegiance with the people that do care about that message. And it's that kind of passionate tribe that you absolutely want to build on. And the final point here, social is moving from distribution to monetization. So the typical approach for social, as we've always known for years, has been like, put your message in, get it out as far as wide as possible across multiple platforms, which is absolutely still the case. But what you're starting to see now is platforms like Facebook, Twitter, all of them ultimately trying to think about how they can monetize the platform better, whether that's allowing you to sell products through having your Pinterest or Instagram or Facebook shops, for example, or being able to monetize your content through like things like Twitter super follows or the ability to subscribe to certain content on Facebook. So what you're starting to see is a shift towards that monetization element. That's more of a kind of just be aware of than you need to take any action on. But ultimately, that takes us to the end. I'll stop sharing, but I'll keep the deck up in case we need to dive back into it for any more data points.
So much happening on the social scene, and this is why we have this monthly conversation in order to keep up. Where am I going to start? Let me start with the over 55s and their total embrace of the world of digital. COVID has definitely parachuted us forward. You said 5 years. Google are saying 10 years. They're saying a decade of digital transformation in 12 months. And so, we always have brands, and in my case, government and public sector going, well, you know what, we want to stick with traditional media because we can't reach a full audience on social. I think that we've tipped the balance, and I think all audiences are accessible on social. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And it's just going to evolve and evolve over time. So I was just actually looking on my desktop because I've got some interesting growth statistics of the platform demographics that are shifting. But fundamentally, both, it's not just Facebook, where I think we know the age demographic skews a bit older, but Facebook's fastest growing segment is the over 55s. Twitter's biggest audience already is over 55s. So, and I did not know that actually until last week when I looked at their latest data. And Instagram have a parallel growth between 13 to 17-year-olds on one side of the spectrum growing quickly and the over 55s. So what we can't say anymore is that, oh, I don't want to be on that platform because my audience is not on there. I know it's painful to hear because you're like, you just want to focus on something, but fundamentally the audiences are shifting and are changing. And there's never been anything like social media that connects across demographics, geographies, and age demographics.
Yeah, as we mentioned last month, because there are more people now using social in the world than aren't, we can now safely say that social media is mainstream media, much to the annoyance and discomfort of a lot of people, including journalists and maybe traditional communicators in government and public sector. The other really important point there is that we're moving to value-based communications. This is something that I've always been harping on about for my niche, going, trust and transparency is the number one currency in the digital age. Now we have a metric and evidence that citizens, consumers, call you what them will, they're the same thing. 71% are migrating to brands, and government and public sector, you are brands also, who actually care and have a social conscience. So this is kind of the first time that I've seen kind of this metric come out where I can apply it to the sector. And also I loved your example of Patagonia alienating an audience based on a value proposition and their company ethos. I often find that government and public sector are so nervous about stepping out and taking a position on a topic because they'll alienate part of an audience, or they have a fear of critique. Whereas you've just presented us with a whole different approach. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I appreciate, like, government and public sector are they're in a rock and a hard place most of the time when it comes to communication. So you have my sympathy, absolutely. And I'm no public sector comms pro like you, Joanne, right? But the evidence is absolutely clear. For any person that's kind of vanilla in your own personal life, they don't typically have, if you're not known for something, whether it's your personal life or your work life, then you can't expect to have, any growth from a kind of digital perspective either, right? It's simple. Same way that you are known in your own personal life for like the funny, the witty, the creative one, then brands need to have that personality as well. And that is fundamentally at the core of it. That's the thing that makes businesses, brands, public sector orgs feel most uncomfortable, because not only should you take a stance on something that you truly believe, you've also you have to have a personality, because fundamentally the world is shifting massively, where typical legacy organizations and institutions are finding different ways to communicate. Jacinta, I forget her surname. Jacinta,
Ardern, yeah.
There you go. Perfect example, right? It's uncomfortable, it's different. She's challenging other world leaders for what it should be done, streaming on Twitch, for goodness sake. Like, that's it. That is communicating with your future citizens, because it's that generation that is the future of your government, your public sector body, whatever it might be. So communicating on our different terms, the formalities have changed, and there's a whole lot of change to deal with. And for the organizations that are okay of challenging that, or challenging their own internal workings of, we've always done it this way, then there's no shortage of proof points. It's just whether you're comfortable to make that change.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. We can no longer use this argument, we've always done it like this. That has been obsolete for at least 5 years now. Organizations and brands are going to become completely obsolete if they don't respond to what citizens and consumers are looking for. Another trend that government and public sector that you called out today should really buy into is private communications, right?
Mm,
You know,
yes.
we want to be brought from the noise and the omni-channel into a place where I can get information that is relevant for me from somebody I trust and from somebody who's got expert knowledge. For me, I'm like, hey, government pros, you know, this trend is big right now and this perfectly suits you. But the thing is, they haven't adapted to audience segmentation. They haven't adapted to email marketing. And actually, I was speaking to broadcasters earlier from the radio sector on this. You know, email is at the bottom of the funnel and social's at the top of the funnel. So the social networks very astutely identified that there was a gap in the middle being taken by search, taken by websites. And they're like, hey, how can we circumvent this? Bingo, let's introduce newsletters. I think it's super smart. I'm going to be testing it for one. But private communications, people are afraid. Sheryl Sandberg describes it, the CEO of Facebook. She said, people talk about proxy numbers. You and I might be familiar with vanity numbers. She says we need to get into the real engagement numbers. And so that's what we're seeing with social. Private
Yep.
conversation, a niche audience. Don't look at the big numbers in terms of followers. Look at the engagement in a niche group. So so what do you think about that? Is that somewhere where we should be looking?
Definitely. I mean, you can see it already happening, like Instagram hiding likes, for example. You know, there is a cognizance or growing cognizance of, like, you know, just having someone click like on something as they pass by it doesn't really mean anything at all. It's about that deep level engagement. And this is why, you know, over the past, we've seen people like buy followers and brag about massive numbers. I think we're starting to hopefully see the end of that, because it's never been about just collecting numbers, right? It's never been about collecting connections. It's always about the kind of hardcore of your community that truly care about what you're saying. And, you know, if you imagine a typical person with 1,000 followers, I'm making these numbers up, but there will be a significant percentage that are very casual, you know, like they followed you for whatever reason in the past. They're not your tribe. They're not necessarily your community. You know, that they follow you. They might very casually, occasionally look at your content, but it's that smaller group in the middle. That's the bit that's really interesting. Those people that truly care, that you can build a community from. And that's the thing. I've seen a lot of people kind of conflate the word community with like their social media following. It's definitely not. The community is, you're a community building expert, so I'm preaching to the choir here. But you know, it's that those people that will want to kind of jump on a live room with you, or go on Clubhouse with you, or attend a webinar with you, or whatever it might be. It's that community. They're the people that truly care about what you have to say, and truly, it's those numbers, the engaged numbers, that we need to care about. That's for sure.
And your other trend, and again, you're so great at sharing all this knowledge. It's fantastic. I feel like I've just hung around all month listening to what's been happening, but I wait for Andy to come along to debrief me. So thank you. But from distribution to monetization, again, my listeners and the viewers here might be going, but Joanne, we're not in the game of monetization. How does this relate to us? And I'm thinking, forever digital marketing and social media has spoken about the conversion as being the sale, as being the monetary value. In my book, I turned the conversion into, change in public behavior. For example, washing our hands, social distancing, now taking up the COVID-19 vaccine. That's the conversion. So for government and public sector, it's from distribution to behavioral change or citizen buy. And so that's been such a light bulb moment for me today, Andy. And so how are we going to achieve that? How can we change people's thinking from distribution and mass numbers to get them to actually take a risk and buy into it's about this tribe? I'm trying to convince people day in, day out. Do you have any advice as to how to change people's thinking?
one, I mean, it's that's a massive question. I wish I could give you the magic bullet that will solve that one. But I think typically one thing that really helps, and it's such an obvious statement, but so often missed. And what I found most powerful about audio focused communication, like I'm not a massive fan of Clubhouse, but I've been using it quite a lot of late. It is the fact of you have real people behind the social channels coming in to ask you questions. And that for me has been, that's the light bulb moment, because then you can see change happening. Then you can start a movement, because it's not just about casual connection anymore. It's about real life human interaction. The same way that you and I met a few years ago and we've started working together and we both have a similar message to share and expand. It's where those true connections happen. And those connections help drive change, right? And yes, social is powerful for distributing a message, but you need lots of people behind that message to really drive the change, whatever change you want to see. Public perception change, behavior change, someone purchasing a new product, whatever it is, you need lots of people behind that message. And the way to garner support behind that is to try and create as many kind of closer connections as possible. And for me, that's where audio first social is the best tool we've probably ever had in terms of garnering that. Because even a webinar is great, but we don't have much interaction. It's mostly about like a monologue between you and I. So with a audio, like a Clubhouse room, for example, everyone, you know, we're all in it together. So allowing other people to speak, and it's basically having like that focus group and using that to kind of spread out. It's that smaller, close-knit community where truly people believe what you believe. And, you know, some magic happens when like-minded people meet. So, and that's the thing that I love the best. It's not just about a casual engagement. It's not just about, oh, they got 200,000 followers and they've, you know, liked my tweet. All of that's fine. And I'm not discounting any of that, but it's how we take it to the next level and go, right, actually, we've gone through that cycle. We know what we're doing, but now we're thinking more about the person behind that profile and how we work, you know, to make that change that you were talking about.
And you know what you've just done? The conversation has kind of come around 360, because you opened up today's session with that graph about the lifespan and the impact of the various different content types, from paid to social to content marketing and authority content. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about legacy. And that's a word I think that government and public sector will cling on to, is that legacy. What is our legacy for this communications? Will it land with people? Will it resonate? Will they then share it with their tribe? And will we get kudos and commitment as a result? So yeah, that's very interesting. But the one thing I was going to say there is that I think the reason why government and public sector, and even a lot of, I mean, I see it in the entrepreneur community as well, is that fear. They're standing behind the wall of fear. And when they're thinking about social as distribution, it means they don't have to step out, like stepping out, going live, stepping out, having a real conversation, stepping out, having a podcast, and stepping out, going into, you know, having an email list, for fear of retribution and
It's truly conquering the fear. I don't have any words of advice for it, to be honest, because to be honest, we all still feel it. I posted something on LinkedIn last week that I knew was divisive, and I actually felt my heart pounding as I was posting it. And I got that knotted feeling in my stomach when I was seeing my notifications ping on LinkedIn, because I was like, you know, how's that going to go down? It's what I believe, but it's difficult. There's no like, and you should be worried about something that you care about. Quite frankly, I think that is an okay thing, you know. But the point is about, you know, do you worry about it and then go, oh, I won't do it because it's safer, or do you worry about it and go, you know I'm slightly concerned about it. I'm concerned in the right way because I care about what I'm doing. I think I've taken the best approach. I'm going to do it anyway, and that's bravery, right? So it's okay to be fearful or worried or nervous, but it's not okay not to do something based on that fear.
I love that. And you're just echoing what Tom Cochrane said I had him on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he used to work for Barack Obama, right? So he was at
Wow.
Art of Digital in the White House 12 years ago now. And Barack Obama said, we are not delivering public services the way the public expect them because we're too afraid. We're afraid, we're risk averse. We're risk averse based on what somebody's going to say or whether we'll get something wrong, which is inevitable. We'll always get something wrong online. But he said, what is the risk of doing nothing? And that was just your point. And I think that is the point. What is the risk of doing nothing? The risk of doing nothing is that you have an information and a communications vacuum. And it allows people with very strong and polarizing views, maybe with a disingenuous objective, whether it's monetary or propaganda or, political disruption or democratic disruption, or even like people who are, have conspiracy theories around COVID-19. That's what happens when you have a gap because you're sitting back, because you're afraid of the critique. I think you are opening your doors and you go, okay, you can come in, you have the stage and the platform, you tell citizens what they should think, and we'll just sit back here and not put our head above the parapet. So yeah, massive. What about TikTok? While we're on the subject of fear, I need to even craft a masterclass on why government should go into TikTok, and I need to do a whole study on that myself. But while we're on the topic of fear and stepping into discomfort, 30% growth. We'll talk about Reddit in a minute, but 30% growth of TikTok. Did you say in the last 2 years?
Last 2 years, yeah. But they're on track. People are saying they're going to hit a billion monthly active users this year. I mean, it is huge. It makes it sound like I'm saying it with some degree of like, I guess, concern or frustration, because it is another platform and it has a completely different approach creatively. And that means it's quite a challenge. Typically, most of the other platforms you can address with a very similar approach in creative. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, those four you can pretty much approach in a similar way, creatively and message wise. TikTok, different story, very different story. So for me, TikTok is like the next level. Once you feel like the bit that we were just talking about, once businesses feel like, or public sector organizations feel like they've got that down, they've got their view, they're okay with voicing their message, they know what they want to talk about, there's absolute clarity, then TikTok is the real creative manifestation of that. So what's, a kind of great example is that, the best creative on TikTok can tell a story in 60 seconds. And that requires expertise to do. And the majority of individuals, myself included, TikTok's a leap too far for me, to be honest, because I can't figure out how I'm going to make this work, because creatively my mind doesn't think that way. I think in kind of long form. Love audio spaces for that, love LinkedIn for that. It's where I'm comfortable, but doesn't mean we're not going to do it. It just means we're going to take a different approach, which means actually working with people that are creators on the platform that care about a similar message to us, and working with those. They can create the content, they're natural and they're native to that. They've got the creativity down, they've got the approach. And then our approach on TikTok will be working with creators to produce content for us and just simply resharing that from our profile. That is the only way at the moment that I've figured out of a TikTok strategy that will work. Because fundamentally, if you don't have the expertise in-house, or you feel that this isn't your thing, that's okay. It isn't for me. Sadly, I purport myself to be an expert on the matter, and I just don't feel comfortable with TikTok. It's not my jam, but that is okay. But other people are expert, and other people will want to work with you on it. And that's where the opportunity is not just by saying, oh, I don't know what to do, I'll kick it down the road for later. It's actually like, no, I think this is a good platform to be on. The growth is phenomenal. If we're seeking to make a change in a certain demographic, and just bear in mind, the biggest demographic on TikTok is 24 to 35 year olds. So it's not the teens that you might thought about before. So if we want to seek to make a change in that demographic, then there's other opportunities rather than just creating that content ourselves. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I love that. Collab with an influential creator who shares your mission and vision. So public sector should be looking there and seeing who's there and doing an outreach. That's a brilliant idea. They have a couple of new features as well. They've and I'm going to my phone because a journalist texted me earlier in the week asking me to do an interview based on a trend from TikTok. While I'm looking for it, they're introducing playlists onto TikTok, which is a really nice feature for us to kind of organize our content, right?
Yeah, indeed. They've added a few features actually. So yeah, playlist one about organizing content. You've articulated that perfectly. They're also doing a Q&A feature, so allowing for much more interaction on the content itself, more collaboration, more feedback, that kind of thing. And they're also revamping their ads as well. So massively improving the targeting of their ads. So if kind of paid is your element, because that's also, don't forget, that's another approach to getting on TikTok. If you don't want to get on yourself or you don't want to work with a creator, you could also just run ads for that. And you don't have to spend a huge amount to do so either. So if you've got some spend, that does allow you some opportunity as well. But yeah, sorry, carry on, Joanne.
So I found the text from the journalist, and it said, we're doing a piece on Monday about a survey which said that people are going to TikTok for their shopping trends to follow and then to Instagram. So, this is kind of mainstream media, radio stations saying, what about this phenomenon? But we've been seeing like social commerce has been around, but now, and there was actually a retail survey released in Ireland over the weekend, and it said that our shopping habits in a number of areas have gone up on this time last year. Clothes, garden furniture, a couple of other things. But the one thing that they said is only 13% of that money is staying in Ireland. The rest is going to brands, probably on Amazon, and brands that we're finding on Instagram, on TikTok. So this is, we need to step up, right? Because otherwise, and I read a stat a couple of weeks ago that for every $100 of ad spend by a business averaging in the world, Google is taking about maybe $48 and Facebook is taking about another 33. They're commanding about 74% of the spend, of the digital spend. Why? Because the other people like newspapers, TV, radio, print haven't stepped online. And so now we have social commerce, and it is the norm, and it's happening just under our eyes. Yeah, it's massive.
100% agree with all of that. Yeah, it's a real challenge, this duopoly of advertising spend. But my one kind of hope, and it might be slightly generous, but my one hope is that the opportunity of like these platforms offering some degree of social commerce does allow the playing field to be leveled a little bit, rather than it just being like, oh, well, I need to buy a new lamp, I need to go to Amazon then. And it kind of, I'm hoping it will level the playing field to a degree to allow smaller organizations, businesses to be found. So see if that plays out in the fullness of time.
Also on Reddit, and thank you for the introduction to Reddit, because you're right, it's a US phenomenon. And for those of us in Europe, it's probably not a platform that we are so engaged with. How should we be leveraging it? Should we be leveraging it?
Yeah, I think for public sector organizations, obviously I can't say with any authority because I've not searched it for that, but fundamentally, the quality of content on there is really good. The quality of discussion is really good. And one of the most powerful bits about social is that we spend most of our time talking about social, about how we market our business and how we push a message out, etc. But one of the most powerful bits of social that the biggest brands understand, social is a listening post for the business to try and understand everything that's being said, public perception around a certain thing. And Reddit is a fantastic community where people voice those things. So for me, it's all about research. It's all about market research for how Reddit should be leveraged, and why it's an important platform to know. And actually, I did say I was going to come back to this, and I will do very quickly just for time. Top tip: even though Pinterest we're not going to cover too much because it's very focused on fashion and commerce. But one thing I think is great for any business, public sector included, is if you go to trends.pinterest.com, if you go there, just put in whatever subject matter you're interested in, it pulls up all the trends that are happening right now on Pinterest. So the same as with Reddit, like Reddit and Pinterest and Twitter, those kind of 3 social platforms for me are by far and away the best research things you can do. You don't need to pay money for a social media listening tool necessarily. Those 3 things: go on Twitter, put in a search topic, you see all the threads about it. Go on to Pinterest, look at some trends. What are the things that are emerging at the moment which might be relevant to you? And of course, Reddit, look at the sub communities, or subreddits they're called, of certain themes and topics, whether it's I mean, I don't know, for public sector, you'd need to spend a bit of time like searching and stuff to find the right ones. But I spend a lot of time in the content marketing and social media ones, because people are talking about stuff all the time. Someone's found a new feature on Facebook, they put it on Reddit. And that's why I love it, because I honestly couldn't do all of these sessions without, spending a bit of time on Reddit and looking through what other people are saying across the world. So yeah, it's a brilliant listening.
So that's great advice. 3 great social listening tools: Twitter, Reddit, and I'm totally going to check out Trends on Pinterest. And wow, what a full month. It is so difficult to keep up. And the one final note that I want to leave with is, social media gets a bad rap often. People make statements and they say, oh, social media, it's just echo chambers. Oh, social media, it's a load of, not important. But actually, what's behind social media are real human beings who have an opinion, who have purchasing power, who have voting power, and who have opinion power. And I think that that's what we need to remember, that we can't just diss it because we're not ready, or we're not brave enough, or competent enough in our skill set. Andy, it's a total pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for doing all the hard work for us over the past month. It's been brilliant. What's been let's end on this. What's your most favorite or aha takeaway from this month? We'll give the last word to you.
Honestly, I don't think I could pick between the last 4 that I mentioned, but I think fundamentally, actually, if I'm going to call one, it's going to be that audio first social, and how Twitter will be rolling that out next month. So I'm hoping we'll do this next month and I'll be talking to you from like, oh, it's launched. Isn't it great? Here's some updates for it. So that's what I'm hoping we'll be in a position to do. But yeah, I think for the age demographic, certainly for the public sector community we're talking about here, I think this is going to be a really powerful thing. And I'm really hoping this is going to be the watershed moment that actually gets people away from the kind of negativity on Twitter, because there is negativity on Twitter, but the ability to have a one-to-one interaction will very much change the dynamic of that negativity, because it takes a very especially awkward person to be rude to someone's face, basically, on voice. So I think hopefully this will be the renaissance that takes Twitter from like slightly miserable moaning in amongst all of the wonderful stuff that's said, into something that's truly powerful and truly wonderful to connect on a one-to-one basis. So that is my hope.
Wow. Well, listen, we're going to have to hold Andy to that, and let's come back in a month, the last Tuesday in April, and maybe we'll all have Twitter Spaces by then, and maybe we can host a Twitter Space and a conversation there, and maybe do this show maybe over there. But Andy Lambert from Content Cal, thank you so much, and remind people where they can find you and where they can also check out your great tool, Content Cal.
Yeah, so find me on LinkedIn. Andy Lambert on LinkedIn. Always happy to connect and chat. And yeah, go to contentcal.io if you want to have a check on the content marketing tool that we've built over the last 5 years or so. So yeah.
Okay, goodbye everybody. Have a great day. And Andy, thank you. We'll see you all next month.
Absolute pleasure. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.